This is lesson 3 for Saxon Math Course 2. Today we're talking about unknown numbers in addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Our objectives for this lesson, we only have one. After this lesson, you should be able to find the value of a variable in addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division equations. Some review from lesson 2. Remember, fact families can be made using inverse operations like addition and subtraction. Addends and factors can be moved around and grouped differently, and it will not affect the answer. Numbers in subtraction and division can't be moved around or grouped differently. It will affect the answer. It'll mess up everything if you move those numbers around. Any number added to 0 stays the same. That's the identity, property of addition. And any number times 0 becomes 0. That's the 0 property of multiplication. And any number times 1 stays the same. That's the identity property of multiplication. For our new concept today, we're going to talk about equations. So any math problem that has an equal sign, we call that an equation. And sometimes instead of looking for the answer in the equation, we're looking for one of the other numbers that they left out. Let's start by talking about addition. It's one of the simpler ones. So anytime you're missing one of the addends in an addition problem, you're going to subtract what you know from the sum to find that missing number. Here's an example. F will be our variable in this equation, so F plus 8 equals 15. We need to figure out what F is, so to do that we subtract the two numbers that were given. 15 minus 8 is 7, so F equals 7. You can test that by taking this 7 and putting it in for F, and 7 plus 8 is 15, so that's the correct answer. Sometimes though you end up with addition problems that have a whole list of addends and then a variable before the sum. So if you end up with one of those, you need to add up all the addends that you're given before you do what we just did in the previous example. So here's a look at that. Sometimes you'll see addition problems like this where you have 5 addends and a sum, and one of those addends is missing. So first we're going to add up everything we know. We add the 4, the 3, the 7, and the 8, and that equals 22. And then we replace all those smaller numbers with just the 22, which gives us a much simpler equation, and we can now subtract to find the answer. 35 minus 22, we end up with 13 for n. For multiplication, it's pretty much the same, except instead of subtracting to find the answer, you're going to be dividing. So anytime you're missing one of those factors in a multiplication problem, you're going to divide by taking the product divided by the known factor. So here we have 6. T is our variable, and remember when they're right next to each other like that, that means multiplication. 6t equals 42. So we will do 42 divided by 6. I'm going to use the /, just a note here, to represent division because that's what you have available to you on your Chromebooks when you're doing your practice problems. So anytime you see this between two numbers, that's going to mean we're dividing. So 42 divided by 6. And we find out that t would be 7. And the same thing, we can take the 7, stick it in there for t. 6 times 7 is 42, so we got the correct answer. Moving into subtraction and division, those are a little bit more complicated because there isn't one rule for any missing number. It depends on which number is missing. So let's hit subtraction first. If we're missing the first number, and remember we call that the minuend, you need to add the other two numbers, the subtrahend and the difference, in order to find the answer. So here's an example of that. S is our variable. S minus 4 equals 7. We have to add the other two numbers, 4 plus 7, and we find out S is 11. Again, you can put that in for S. Always remember that this number in a subtraction problem, until we start dealing with negative answers, negative differences, that first number needs to be the largest number in the problem. That's why we need to add to find it when it's missing. Now, if you're missing the second number, the subtrahend, then you have to subtract the other two numbers, and notice that the minuend comes first because it's the bigger number. So you're going to do minuend minus difference. Here's an example of that. 14 minus our variable is going to be the letter P equals 6. So we're just going to do 14 minus 6 to find that middle number. And you find out that P would be 8. And again, you can plug that in and check it. Division, very similar to subtraction, but we're going to use multiplication and division to solve instead of addition and subtraction. So same kind of rules. When you're missing that first number, the dividend, we're going to multiply because that dividend needs to be the biggest number in the division problem until we start dealing with fractional answers and decimal answers and things like that. Your first number in division is going to be the biggest number. So here's an example. Y divided by 5 equals 10. We take those other two numbers that were given and we multiply them to find y. Y equals 50. If you're missing the second number, your divisor, then you're going to divide the other two numbers. And again, remember your dividend's your biggest number, so that's going to come first. Dividend divided by quotient. Here's an example of that. 36 divided by our missing number W equals 9. So we're going to divide, remember dividend first, 36 divided by 9, and we find out W's 4. And again, just put that 4 in there. 36 divided by 4 is 9, so we know we got the right answer. That's it for your lesson today. We will see how you do on the practice problems, and if you have any questions, make sure you ask them by typing them into that discussion section. We will see you in the next video.